okay, with 3 squares over there. And you are going to assign a fictional business identity to us. So it's very important for you to tell us who we are, because we don't know who we are fictionally, all right? And you're going to have 25 minutes. I'm going to give you one of these delightful devices. And there's a 5-minute cushion in case you run over a little bit. Okay, and you're going to be describing the legal, financial, and ethical dimensions of the problem and your proposed solution, and your solution is to pass muster on all 3 grounds. Obviously, the greatest weight is given to the ethics element because this is a business ethics competition. We will not interrupt you during the 25 minutes. You have no idea how difficult it is for me. But afterwards, we will have a Q&A. In the Q&A, we will stay in character with the identity that you assigned to us. After the Q&A is over, and that goes on for 15-20 minutes, then we break roll and we give you feedback about the presentation. You need to describe the ethical issues in your analysis in a simple, practical, and common sense fashion, meaning do not use words like deontological. If you use technical philosophical terminology, you're actually digging for that. Also, do not base your argument on religious or theological grounds because that's considered a weakness. So we're not basing it on theology, we're basing it on ethics. Also, reading your presentation is a huge no-no here in this competition, but you may use notes and you can look at the screen if you need to, but reading is not acceptable. And obviously during the presentation, I know you know this already, every member of the team has to have some sort of a speaking role in whatever language you choose. All right, so now we're going to
How many languages do you speak?
multiple languages, and we also know a little bit about American Sign Language. So we're going to get started. We're going to introduce ourselves. And
I'm Max McSall from 24 Hour Fitness. I'm one of the general managers there, and I'm fortunate enough to be here to, judge you guys.
no push-ups required.
Just something.
I even practice.
I'm Erica Stickler from the University of Massachusetts Law, where I co-direct the Dunning Center for Business Ethics and Social Responsibility.
And my name is Ruth Kraft. I'm a real judge. I used to be a real judge in real life. I was a New York State judge for 14 years. I'm now the chair of the employment law practice in a New York law firm. And I've been judging this competition for 17 years. So I'm the Uber judge. Okay, I'm going to get this started. Any one of you can hold on to it, or you can put it up on the podium, which you prefer. And you're ready to get started.
Everyone's like put down. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah, we're good to go.
All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you guys for being here today. We are Square State Consulting. Square State Consulting, like I said, we are a Wyoming-based business, and we are focused on the economic and environmental issues. You all are here today because you are oil company representatives with a stake in the Western states, so the United States, Western States Oil Company representatives. We are at the Wild West Energy Convention.
Today, the problem we'll be talking about is finding the balance between energy development and sage-grouse conservation. However, the bigger issue at hand is the fact that oil companies are coming in and creating this infrastructure, like roads, power lines, and well pads. That right there is deteriorating the ecosystem and the sage-grouse habitat, and so with this, we're going to look at this issue from a Wyoming example.
I'm Samantha Daniels, and I'm the economic advisor.
I'm Braden Dawson, your ethical consultant.
I'm Ryan Grosico, the financial consultant.
I'm Kaylee Holyfield, the legal expert. I'm Lauren Rubinson, and I'm your environmental advisor. So our mission today is to support energy development while protecting the Western landscape and ecosystem. So we also value the Cowboy Code of the West, and Braden will talk to you a little bit more about that.
So like Lauren said, this is the Cowboy Code of the West. There are 10 principles, and it's actually on page 2 of your guys' booklet if you want to look through that along with the presentations. We're going to focus on 3 of them today through the ethical lens. So that's just a little bit about that if you want to refer back to that throughout the presentation.
But first, we're going to play a brief video explaining a little bit about what a sage-grouse is and how the bird is involved in the West.
The mating dance of the sage-grouse is really a spectacle. Each spring, male sage-grouse develop this incredible plumage, and then they strut their stuff in such a way that they try to attract females. It happens in the very early morning. There's sounds associated with it. And once you've seen this thing happen, you never forget it. The sage grouse occupies a huge range of land across the interior West, from the Dakotas to California. It is a keystone wildlife species for the sagebrush habitat, meaning that the health of the sage grouse is a very important indicator of the health of other species that depend on the same habitat, like mule deer, pronghorn antelope, and golden eagles. We're acting now to protect the land that the sage grouse calls home, because these places are important to hunters, to bird watchers, and to others who enjoy our public lands and the incredible opportunities that these places afford us. The biggest threats to sage grouse habitat on public lands are energy development, off-road vehicle use, and underregulated grazing where it goes on the public lands. We've already lost half of the sagebrush ecosystem of the West. The Bureau of Land Management is pulling together management plans for 50 million acres of its land holdings. If BLM does not bring solid science-based management to the sage grouse habitat, we will lose more of the sage grouse and other species that depend upon this ecosystem.
Now that you know a little bit more about the sage grouse and what we're combating today, here's a map of their current and historical habitats. As you can see, the blue is current right now, so where they're living and prospering and breeding. The green is the historic, where the sagebrush has deteriorated. We at Square State Consulting do not want to see this map to have any more green on it, so that's what we're going to talk about today.
There are three primary stakeholders within this problem: the sage grouse, the state residents, and oil companies. There's a unique relationship between all three. The sage grouse depend on the state residents because state residents value their public land and their wildlife, so they depend on those state residents for their protection. The state residents depend on the oil companies. Oil companies provide a huge economic boost, jobs, and just the general livelihood of the state. Once again, the oil companies also depend on the state residents. They need the support of those state residents to keep their companies going. The oil companies see sage grouse as a bit of a hurdle to jump. They make their profits off the land, but that land is currently being inhabited by those sage grouse. And of course, the sage grouse see those oil companies as a threat. Like we said before, the infrastructure, the oil pads, the light pollution, the roads are destroying their current habitat and their populations are decreasing. All right, so why is this issue important to oil companies? The population for sage grouse has plummeted by over 90%, and we see that the habitat is quickly disappearing. So in your booklet, there is a list of people that we talked to, and one of the guys named Tom Christensen, he said, sage grouse do not hang around human infrastructure. This includes roads, power lines, and buildings. The birds also hate noise. So there are a lot of environmental threats that we came across. First, that the sage grouse are the umbrella species for the habitat. All the animals in the ecosystem are being disrupted, but since they're the umbrella species, their health reflects the condition of the sagebrush area. They provide nest, shelter, and they're a food source for that. So for example, pronghorn would feed on them. The population has decreased from several million to less than 400,000. Wildfire has also posed a huge threat. Cheatgrass is a perfect fuel for monster wildfires, and it burns quickly and has destroyed the sagebrush. And if you look at this chart, if you look at Idaho, the past 3 years, this is the acreage burn, and in Idaho, 700,000 acres have been burned because of cheatgrass, and that is destroying their habitat. Other environmental threats would be that sagebrush is what they thrive on, and they are not, when they have difficulty surviving in areas that are covered in less than 25%. And barbed wire fence is also a huge threat because when the bird is flying from the predator, it gets impaled by the barbed wire fences.
So I'd like to start with just a brief history of this problem. In 2002, the Institute for Wildlife Protection brought a petition to the Fish and Wildlife Service and said, we'd like to get the greater sage grouse on the endangered species list. In reaction to that, the Fish and Wildlife Service initiated a 90-day review. After this 90-day review, they concluded there was not substantial information to list the greater sage-grouse on the endangered species list. Then between 2002 and 2003, about 22 other organizations also did the same. They came to the Fish and Wildlife Service and they said, we want to petition to put the greater sage-grouse on the endangered species list. Once again, the Fish and Wildlife Service did another 90-day review. In this 90-day review, they found that, well, maybe there is reason to put this bird on the endangered species list. In reaction to that, they completed the second step, which is doing a 12-month review. In this 12-month review, they came back on their decision and said, we have no substantial information to list this bird. Once again, in 2006, the Western Watersheds Project out of Idaho actually took the Fish and Wildlife Service to court, and they said their decision-making in the last step is biased. They did not have the reasoning to say this bird should not be on the list, and the court actually ruled in favor of the Western Watersheds Project. In response to that, in February of 2008, the Fish and Wildlife Service did another status review. On this status review, they decided, the sage-grouse is not such peril that it must be listed on the endangered species list. Instead, we're going to list it as a candidate species. A candidate species means that they are queued up to be evaluated to be put on the endangered species list. Each candidate species is given a ranking from 1 to 12, 1 being the most in danger and 12 being the least. The greater sage-grouse was listed as an 8. In 2012, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, asked all of their offices to review the resource management plans. They found that most of these were inadequate. Wyoming, on the other hand, actually had a great resource management plan, the core area strategy, which I'll explain in just a moment. And so this is actually what the federal level has shaped their 9-plan around, which Samuel will explain just shortly. In September of 2015, the Fish and Wildlife Service entered a negotiated agreement with the Wild Earth Guardians, an environmental activist group. Wild Earth Guardians said to them, you need to make a decision. Either take this bird off the list or put it on the list. We can't have it in this in-between ground. And so the Fish and Wildlife Service took it completely off the candidate species list. Meanwhile, in Wyoming, everyone kind of caught wind that this bird was going to be in danger, and they thought, we do not want this bird to be put on the endangered species list. If it does, all of our land resources are going to be so heavily regulated that none of our energy companies will thrive and our economy will take a huge hit. So in 2007, former Governor Freudenthal created the sage-grouse implementation team. This team drafted the core area strategy. The core area strategy essentially identified the places that the birds were currently thriving and identified those as core areas. The remainder of the land was designated as a non-core area. So when it comes to applying for permits, the non-core areas are preferenced over the core areas in order to protect those places where the birds are doing very well. In 2008, Governor Freudenthal adopted this core area strategy idea in his executive order. In 2009, the BLM issued the Greater Sage-Grouse Policy Instruction Memorandum, and Wyoming was actually exempt from this because the core area strategy was working so well. This instruction memorandum instructed the rest of the BLM offices to model their plans off of this core area strategy. And then this was once again revised in 2012. There was really no changes to the concept, but there were some terminology changes, so just to be aware of that.
So as Kayla was mentioning earlier, that Wyoming has a 9-plan as of right now, and this is on a federal level, and this is across 11 states. And just in December, U.S. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke was saying that the states need more power for sage-grouse, so they're trying to move it back to the states and take it away from the federal level. And then just to say again, the core area strategy is based on a state level, and this is the plan we're trying to bring into other states. And then the 9 plan is on the federal level. So in April 2010, Fish and Wildlife Service decided that sage-grouse needed to be warranted under protection and be on the possible endangered species list. And this is due to lack of regulatory mechanisms because across 11 states they didn't have the proper enhancements there to keep them alive and their population was declining. And the BLM had a final say, but they needed options to pick from to be able to figure out how to save the sage-grouse. So this brought us into alternatives. These 3 alternatives were the ones that were kind of vetoed overall. Alternative A is what we refer to as the no action plan, and the Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service decided that they just want to keep the current management practices the way they were and have no disturbance cap for the bird. Alternative B focused on the national technical team, and they said that they wanted to just focus on the priority habitat, which was the core area strategy for the bird, and set the cap at 3% disturbance for the oil companies. And alternative D is looking at the local adjustments, the national technical team, and the executive governor's order to decide how they're going to protect the bird on protection and restoration of the program. And their cap was set at 9%, and this was just a little bit too high, so the birds were getting affected still. Alternative C is what they refer to as the most restrictive plan, and this was through a citizens group lens. And the citizen group decided they just want to stop livestock grazing to keep them going, and then this was set at a 3% disturbance cap. Alternative B was looking at local adjustments, the national technical team, and Wyoming governor's executive order, and they decided to recommend focus on priority, general, and connectivity habitats to keep the oil companies and sage-grouse habitats both thriving. And this was very similar to alternative D, except their disturbance cap was set at 5, so it was lower, so it helped both the oil companies and the birds. And this was the most preferred. And then looking at the most restricted, the most restricted alternative C, and it would be about roughly 10,000 jobs lost, which would result in about $570 million in debt for the state. And then if implemented alternative B, it'd be roughly 3,500 jobs gone, would be a cause of debt of 190,000. And through financial scope, this just shows how alternative C would be more restricted and would be hurting the states more, and alternative B is the best option.
So why is this an ethical issue? When we were talking to Wyoming Game and Fish Program Coordinator Tom Christensen, he recommended the book, A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. And Aldo Leopold talks about ethics in two lenses here, ecological and philosophical. In the ecological, he says it's a limitation on freedom, action, and the struggle for existence. So we took that and we're looking at that through our stakeholders lens. So finding the balance between ethically trying to get the resources out of the ground for the oil companies, for the stakeholders, the citizens of the states, but trying to conserve efforts and keep these birds living for generations to come. So where's that ethical gray line of trying to find people, birds? In the philosophical realm, it's the differentiation of social from antisocial conduct. And then we as oil companies and oil company representatives just have the question, how do we handle this issue? Again, trying to find that balance of that gray line. So let's look at an ethical spectrum that we have here. On one end of the spectrum, you can see the sage-grouse endangerment, and that's when they go on the endangered species list. The birds are so protected, and they're thriving, they're great. On the bird side, everything's great there. However, Western oil is falling because there's so much red tape to cut through. Really, there's no place to drill anywhere, so you can't get the resources. In states like Wyoming, basically anything that's state funded just goes down the drain because we don't have any GDP coming in anymore. On the other side, you have sage-grouse extinction, and that's where oil companies like yourselves drill and they don't care about the environment. There's nothing that is stopping them, and they drive the birds into the ground basically. They have so much infrastructure that deteriorates the ecosystem until all the birds die off. Again, you can see on the side, increasing bird population, that renders a hit to some of the economics coming in, and then on the flip side, maybe rising revenue, but the birds population is declining. So Square State Consulting Solutions fall in between that ground. We want to have an even balance between energy and conservation. Some of the tangible good and harm ethically that you can see looking at some of the financials as well. This left side here with all the black numbers, that's the Wyoming's example of a total economic impact, and it is in your booklets as well if you want to take another look at it. This total economic impact that it could have, that Plan C that Sammy was talking about is under this lobby for total restriction on the far right side here. And you can see that that's almost a $5 billion cut to just Wyoming's economic impact, and it'll be a lot greater in other western states that are larger than Wyoming, since Wyoming is a smallly populated state. Again, you can see that 20,000 jobs will be lost from the initial 80,000, and then it's just each of these, you can see that it's given up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, but you're in turn, you're saving the birds more. So, excuse me, advisor to the Governor Matt Mead in Wyoming, Mike O'Grady, we talked with him, and he said that we're giving up a little to have a long-term growth opportunity. So in other words, where's the line to find the sustainable way for the future? So again, the problem is finding the balance between energy development and sage-grouse conservation, and how do we ethically develop energy given the new wildlife regulations. The issue at hand Energy development causes infrastructure problems. There's a lot of infrastructure, whether it be roads, power lines, or fences around the perimeter that just decrease the ecosystem and cause harm to the birds. This is a Western problem, and we wanted to look at it through a Western philosophy and solve it with a Western solution. We came up with a three-pronged solution that will help if you take this back to your companies, that we believe it will help the solution. 1, lobby for core area strategy in your respective state. 2, develop alternative healing strategies. And 3, be proactive because sustainability matters. We want to see these we want to see your companies thriving future generations for years and years to come.
First, let's talk about lobbying for the core area strategy in your state. The First Amendment says that we as citizens can petition the government for redress. This means we can come to our legislators and we can say this is what we want, this is what we support. So we suggest that your companies lobby and support the core area plan or the implementation of the core area plan. Why should we do this? Well, it keeps the sage grouse off the endangered species list, which as we discussed before, if they're on the endangered species list, there's so much red tape that we can't make our profits and give back to our community. Secondly, the core area plan also keeps the power in the hands of the state. It's a lot easier to manage things between companies and the state than it is between companies and a much higher federal level. Secondly, we also recommend that you follow your state's rules for lobbying. For example, in Wyoming, all you have to do is register with the Secretary of State's office. You have to provide the names of who you're representing and provide a list of any expenses over $500. So just make sure that you're sticking within the legal realms in your state.
Okay, so taking a look at lobbying for core areas in the ethical lens, this is kind of where we go back to the Cowboy Code of the West, if you guys want to flip back to that in the booklet. We're looking at this through a principle approach. And we look at the principle in the Cowboy Code of the West of remember that some things aren't for sale. So why we talk about this, remember that some things aren't for sale, is because really integrity shouldn't be in question, and it shouldn't be for sale. Your values as leaders in your companies shouldn't be for sale. The culture of it should not be for sale. So really, whether it be to the politician or whether it be you yourselves or employees in your company, integrity should not be a question, and it shouldn't be for sale. Lobbying is a win-win for all stakeholders involved. It helps protect the birds. It also gives you options to drill into the core areas, around the core areas, and it also keeps you accountable to your stakeholders, your shareholders being the citizens of your state. In the end, really just be transparent when you're with your stakeholders. Remember that some things aren't for sale. Helps you, keeps you accountable to be transparent with all your stakeholders and really create that company culture that stakeholders will be appreciative of.
Now looking through this from a financial aspect of it, lobbying and execution is very important. However, like Brendan said, it's not so much buying who we want in office, but buying for the right things. And using this example, you can see that Wyoming has spent over $50 million in sage-grouse conservation. This conservation effort has been going towards research about the habitat, the bird, and also implementing this conservation effort. Like Haley said, it's easier to partner with your states, and like I said, the example here. However, if you don't lobby for core area strategies, there's a possibility of the endangered species list, and this would directly impact your oil company by at least $1 billion, granted the area and everything.
The second solution is to implement alternative drilling strategies. There is a diagram on page 5 of your book that I guess illustrates some of the alternatives that we'll be discussing. We suggest using horizontal drilling and clustered drilling. Traditionally, drilling is done directionally, so there are multiple pads, each drilling down. These solutions just drill down once and then branch out. That way, there's a smaller footprint with the pad and the rows. There is actually no legal difference. It doesn't matter what you choose to do. In fact, this is actually better for the environment and better for your profits, which Brendan is here. The executive order from 2014 does say that, just to quote that, to ensure continued sustainability of Wyoming's economy, all efforts to encourage, enhance, and prioritize development outside of the core population areas should be made. So secondly, we suggest you do whatever you can to prioritize those areas outside of the core areas first. Apply for those permits there first, and then of course, make sure you follow the directions of your permit. We want to avoid stepping into those core areas if we do not have access to those. If for some reason that happens, you will be held accountable to whatever your game and fish area is in your state. For example, in Wyoming, you'd be held accountable to Wyoming Game and Fish, who could then take that case to the Oil and Gas Commission, and it could be further moved up to the state court. So we want to keep you out of the courts, so just make sure that you follow those permits and prioritize those areas outside of the core areas.
Looking at this, implementing alternative drilling strategies through an ethical way, again, we go back to the Cowboy Code of the West, and we choose to be tough but fair, because it's tough. I mean, it's an environmentally questionable issue, drilling as it is in the first place. Also, when talking about drilling, you're taking away some of that habitat from the grouse, but you also you have to be fair. You have to be fair to all stakeholders. You have to be honest and right in your thinking. So the way that the alternative drilling strategies work is horizontal drilling, like she said, is it goes out or down and then out. So really you're taking up less drill pad surface area, which means that less infrastructure is being made and harming the ecosystem, meaning less roads, so there's only one road that has to come in, rather than if you have traditional drilling, there's multiple roads, there's bigger fences, more power lines, stuff like that. So it really keeps it in check, if you will. The other cluster drilling is the other way. It's basically does the same thing ethically. It's just another way of doing things where you're drilling multiple wells down rather than out. And then the other solution is to just go around the core areas at all costs. Try to stick out of there. You may take a hit financially in the beginning, but we believe that if you do it in the long term, it will promote the longevity of your company.
Kazakhstan National Technical University did a study about the benefits of horizontal drilling for oil companies. As you can see up here, horizontal drilling is about $3 or $4 per barrel, while vertical wells is $7 to $9. Not only is this more affordable, this is also an easier way for you to drill, and it keeps money in your pockets, more money in your pockets. However, like Braden said, it is a win-win for the company, as the oil pad, there's not as many surface disturbance, and the total cost of horizontal drilling is about 50% less than vertical drilling.
The third solution we suggest is to make decisions that are sustainable both in your long-term plan and your short-term plan. The executive order does require some amount of reclamation on the land that your company is used to drill on. We suggest actually going above and beyond that. Like I said, the executive order, basically says come back in and plant the grasses that you destroyed. We suggest you go beyond that by doing some cheatgrass mitigation. So try to spray for that. As Lauren said before in the beginning of the presentation, cheatgrass is a huge fuel for fires, and those fires destroy the habitat of the sage grouse. So we're saying, do what you can with our infrastructure to keep that minimum, but also give a little bit extra.
If you need to go on,
Okay,
still
okay.
5 minutes.
Sure, that's okay. I'll go ahead and move that on to the rest of you.
Oh, that's
Don't
the
feel
25-minute, huh?
Yeah, that was the 25.
Oh, good. I was.
No,
Perfect.
okay, you got 5 more, so make the most of it.
Awesome.
Okay, that's fine. I'll pass that off to Brad next.
Me next.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking at the sustainability solution through an ethical lens, the Cowboy Code that we decided to use is when you make a promise, keep it. And that can be with everything. However, in terms of sustainability, if you say you're going to do something, make sure you follow through with it and walk the walk. Sustainability matters. We also believe that you guys can create a sustainable culture, which then create an ethical culture in your respective businesses. Be proactive for the future. Whether this is spraying for cheatgrass or taking care of other environmental opportunities like Lauren's going to talk about here, just be aware and be cognitive of the future and use what you have. Bring up conversations and education in your respective businesses, and be aware of both volume and content, because bringing that up really raises awareness and helps long-term growth. Again, long-term action for long-term profits. We'll just take a look at this. Like what Lauren said earlier, the sage-grouse are an umbrella species, but there's a whole other ecosystem involved here. Whether it be the pronghorn, or this cute little bunny guy down here, all of it is impacted, and the sage-grouse, their health directly replicates that ecosystem. So if you protect them, the rest will follow, basically. So be sustainable for the whole entire ecosystem.
All right, so we have a list of environmental opportunities that we want to go over with you. So less roads would be a good thing. So we need to avoid driving at night. That's because the sage grouse gets disturbed and they flee when they're scared. We want to suppress invasive cheatgrass, which is the threat for the fire. We want private companies to plant the sagebrush, and we want to make fences with white reflectors. Like I said earlier, when they're fleeing from their predator, they run into the fence and they get impaled and they die, and that's another problem. And we also want to support tools to prevent frequent wildfires.
Continuing on, the financial aspect of controlling cheatgrass, for example, is displayed here. This study done by Colorado State University examined both manual labor and chemical labor. And if you look in here at the Toron and the mowing, it's the cheapest method. So an average well size is about 3.5 acres, and so this would be $130 per acre. So roughly $460 every time you do this, because you have to mow 3 times a year. So that is about roughly $1,300. So I mean, it's like Braden said earlier, it's doing the little things now for the long term of your company. Today, we focused on the problem of finding the balance between energy development and sage-grouse conservation, given the new wildlife guidelines. The solutions that we recommended were lobbying for core area strategies, alternate drainage strategies, and also being sustainable for the future. So we, as Square State Consulting, want you to go back to your company, share these recommendations, get the awareness up, like Braden stated earlier. However, we want you guys to join us in implementing these financially, ethically, and legally sound solutions for the better of the future. And we just want to leave you guys with a question today. How do you want to leave your legacy in the Western states? Do you want this bird to prosper, or do you want to turn your cheek and not see it happen? Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't know if any of you know my friend, Dr. Tom White.
White?
The head of this program, the IBECC.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Tom White has written a book that's pretty famous in some circles, and it's called In Defense of the Dolphins. So he, from his years out at Loyola, looking out at the Pacific, and he also died. He became impassioned about the dolphins. The dolphins have cognitive abilities and EQ, emotional intelligence, that some believe is higher than that of human beings. So when you talk about a dolphin as a stakeholder in the ecology of the Pacific Ocean in Southern California, if you read the book, and I highly recommend, it's very engaging. You really fall in love with the dolphins because they're, I hate to use the word that they're human, but they really have all of these characteristics. Now you defined the sage grouse, which is the cutest, most adorable looking thing I ever saw, with the plumage and the cooing, as a stakeholder. Now, I come from ExxonMobil, and I have a boss you may also have heard of, named Rex Tillerson. Okay, so I think a lot of us know a little bit about Rex. Okay, Rex is a very tough, very serious man. You want me to go back to him and tell him that this grouse is a stakeholder? I don't want to get fired. With all due respect to the rest of this program, I would be in tremendous trouble. I would really have to start job hunting before I go back and say to Rex, you know, yes, there's a legacy issue, but the grouse is the stakeholder here. Help me out, please. What am I going to say to him when he says, this is, you know, notwithstanding all the other characteristics here, why is a grouse a stakeholder, as opposed to a dolphin, if we stipulate that the dolphin has this higher level of intellect?
Can you actually go back to my stakeholder stuff?
Yes.
So, I...
I'm getting dizzy.
Way back.
Way back.
Way back.
Way back.
So, like I said,
the stakeholders, that's what I'm talking about.
So there's 3 primary stakeholders, and I would say that the sage grouse are represented by the state residents. So especially from Wyoming, I've been to meetings, I have seen posters and gotten millions of emails about protecting our public land and protecting our wildlife. So I think really,
so we can take out the grouse.
So we can like make the sage grouse a subset of the state residents.
Okay.
So essentially these are
they do live there.
Exactly. So
they don't get to vote.
There is such a huge culture in the West about protecting the public land and the public spaces and wildlife. I mean, I know some of us can attest to that who are hunters and fishers. People are so passionate about that. But the minute that this is disrespected, you lose all the respect.
So why
for-
don't, instead of sage grouse, would it be fairer to say, still have the tripartite Venn diagram, but call it ecological interests, or?
We just wanted to focus on the sage grouse particularly because one, they're the umbrella species, they're affected.
Oh.
And two, because it's been, I mean, they've been, like her legal history was talking about, they've been on and off this list for
Yeah.
so long now. And really, the problem is if they go on the endangered species list, like Wyoming itself is not, that's
No.
not a good thing. And for other states as well, Montana, Idaho, Colorado.
Yeah.
But
So now you put, at one of your last slides said the cost per acre, okay? Didn't look like very much in the way of money, except that in that earlier slide, the multicolor one, this one here, right?
Yes.
This is a lot of acres. So why wasn't there transparency in terms of how much is this really gonna cost across all of these areas to implement that mowing and regrowth strategy? Because it looked to me like it wasn't gonna be chump change, we were talking millions upon millions of dollars. We've got to now go back and say, I have to tell Rex, okay, you know, you've helped me resolve the grouse issue, okay, in terms of being a stakeholder, and I'm gonna kick him off. But he's a bottom line kind of guy, and he's gonna say, how much is this gonna cost? And based on that, how much are we prepared to do? And if we don't do enough, if we just do some but not enough, is that accomplishing anything, or is that just throwing money down the drain?
I was just gonna say, if you flip that over to the next page, there's
Yes, sir.
some of that, or no, maybe it's, with the Excel spreadsheet there. That's kind of, that's where that is and where you're looking at the total economic impact.
No, but I wanna know how much it's gonna cost us, that's my problem.
Just for the mowing and stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can take this one.
Okay.
That map that you're referring to
Yeah.
is, yes, that's where the sage grouse live, not necessarily where the oil wells are. So when you go back to Rex, I recommend this. Like we said, lobbying or, you know, partnering up with these states, your state government. If you're doing that, you don't have to spend so much money out of your pocket. You know, like I said, for example, Wyoming, $50 million, that's going to the conservation effort. However, we are looking at long term, so doing a little bit now. You don't have to do, you know, you don't have to spray or necessarily mow. You know, here's a $70 cost right here. This spray, here's a $42 one. So going back to Rex, you tell them that, like we said before, it's the sage grouse we have to look for the future. The money value that you're going to save from saving these birds is going to show up in the books.
Do we have to mow or use herbicide in order to reclaim? Or is reclamation something different? Can we breed these birds in protected habitats and then set them free?
Reclamation is just in terms of the actual land that
Okay.
you're using. The reclamation doesn't consider the wildlife. So reclamation is just saying, please go back and just replant the native grasses, et cetera, et cetera. And we just suggest make it better than it was before, because that'll benefit. You know, decreasing the wildfires is gonna help the birds who that's just another one of those things that they're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
And then going back to what you said about breeding the birds, I know that you have to go through a lot of paperwork, a lot of more, you know, sending to the courts to actually get a license to breed for these birds. And currently in Wyoming, there's actually a whole little thing going on about a private breeder. So, I mean, that's taking on a whole other animal as an oil company, and I don't keep talking about Rex and who he is. Sounds like something he doesn't want to go through. So just
He likes to hunt, actually.
okay, so yeah.
Are these
So do
birds
we.
hunted, by the way?
Yes.
Are these birds hunted?
Yes.
They are. But that's, I mean, then that's a whole other realm of it, is if we want to, as the hunter, but also conservationist in me, I want to keep them around so that we can hunt them later. But it's all about, I mean, Wyoming Game and Fish is all about that. They're controlling
They're controlling
the population so that, I mean, and there's obviously, like, you just can't go out and kill 50 of them in a day. I mean, there's definitely, like, regulations and stuff. But they are hunted for sport bird, yes.
So I have a question. Are there legal precedents for the recommendations you're offering? This is not a situation that's unique just to Wyoming or our industry. Has this happened? Are the recommendations you're suggesting, have you seen that in other states? Have these been implemented successfully? What are the, benefits that we can
Yeah,
consider
sure.
and have actually accrued already in
Yeah, so
large pots?
like Sammy said earlier, it's why, or I guess Kayla said earlier, Wyoming was exempt from the whole ramifications of everything because how well it's done. A lot of the western states have looked into what Wyoming is doing, and I know for Idaho and Washington and Montana have actually looked into it and are trying to implement their own program. And it's worked so well in Wyoming that these states are saying, you know what, we have to do this also, or we're going to be sitting here years down the road and saying, what would happen if we did do that instead of doing it now to benefit so.
Okay, can you just clarify, so why are we sitting here today listening to this set of recommendations? Is there some threat that regulation is about to change?
Yeah, so in December of 2017, the regulation changed from, what was his name, Zinke? Brian Zinke, the Secretary of the Interior. He basically said that the power, basically Washington, if it's on a federal level and the birds are if they're placed on the endangered species list, then that's bad for all western states. What he said is, because Washington doesn't know what's going on, and they don't care about a bird in little small town Wyoming, small town Colorado. They just don't care. They don't know where the core area. Brian Zinke said that the states need to have the power because they can interact with the oil company representatives and basically fix this issue because they're in it. They're living it every day. And it is a real problem because these birds are dying, the infrastructure's tearing up the ecosystem, so it's got all parts to it. But in 2017 or December 2017, that was the push is, okay, states need to have this power because they know what's going on.
And then adding on to that, his previous statements when he was first in office was, let's cut back restrictions, let free will benefits. You as the old oil companies would go in there and drill as much as you. The state said, whoa, a minute. Governor Matt Lee was a big one of that. He was pushing, let us control this because it's our issue. It's not so much the government's issue. We're the ones that are seeing the economic disadvantages and advantages, so let us have it. So that's where our ethical issue is. You have to do this for the long-term longevity of your company.
Okay. Questions?
You guys did a very good job.
I have one more question. So we know that stakeholders are increasingly sophisticated, and I'm a little bit concerned that the recommendations you're making have us making small, perhaps low-hanging fruit contributions of the sustainability side. And I'm a little bit worried that we're going to get environmental interest groups who are going to go to the media and go to residents and go to the feds and say, listen, these companies, they're just trying to get by with the minimum. We know that these companies are just in it for their own profits. Do you see any risk associated with that perception?
Okay, so Tom Christensen, the State Grouse Program Coordinator in Wyoming, talking with him, he said, you can't have you can do a lot now. However, the way the population works and the way implementing this works, it's not going to see beneficiaries right away. You're not going to see that benefits of the population. So when you have these groups coming up to you, or going to the feds and saying they're only doing bare minimum, it's a long process. So going back to what Rachel said about education and getting the conversation out, you have to be able to take that and be able to hit everybody involved. The people that are for the bird, the people that are against the bird, the people that are for oil, against the oil. You have to educate it so everybody sees the bigger picture. Because right now it's going to be like, oh, they're not doing that. We understand that. However, it's a long-term process because the population is going to roll coaster. So some years it might be low, but if you guys do the right thing, you're actually going to see it long-term where it's not 400,000, it's 800,000 because of what you guys do for your company well past the sustainability.
I just want to make sure that what we do that's right is actually generating the goodwill you all can.
Absolutely. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
First of all, this is the most adorable bird. It's just too cute. And the use of the video. There's a picture of him in the handout. But seeing the bird live was so compelling because I live in New York City, so birds, who cares? But when you see the bird, he's so adorable, and you get the sense of how you made a very strong case that he's so much a part of the ecostructure, that to let them die off would be catastrophic. To let them become endangered species so that you choke by the noose, and I think they used the noose in the Old West, right?
Yeah.
Okay, to hang a state like Wyoming, where I'm thinking you had a metric about labor and how many billions of dollars would be lost if this became an endangered species. And I thought you should have pushed a little bit harder on that, because what industry do we have in Wyoming to replace those jobs?
Yeah, no.
Maybe tourism, ultimately,
Yeah.
because the bird's not there, there's nothing to go see. So I really thought that was a point that needed to be made. You did something very difficult, but it's to your great credit. 90% of the time, it's so easy for the consultant to say we're talking to a board of directors, right, of one company. Because it's very easy to convince a board. You put us in, it's almost like we're the lobbyists. We're going back at an industry conference, and now each of us in our own way has to influence our bosses or our boards to do something. And that's a more sophisticated approach. It's more complicated. It's not a zero-sum game. And you could be dealing with very different personalities, which is why I brought up Rex. Nothing against Rex, by the way. He may be looking for a new job now. But seriously, each one of us may have different concerns based upon our corporate cultures, and we're not a unitary culture just because we're all members of the same organization. So I think you gave yourself a little bit of a difficult position. The question I want to ask you or raise is the concept of, incrementalism, if you will. You created, it's right up there, lots of incremental alternatives. What I think was missing, and there's very little missing here, by the way, is incrementalism acceptable? Is it ethical? Okay, is it ethical for me to say, I'll take that $30.75, because what the heck, it's the cheapest, but is that ethical given the stakes of what's involved? Should we take some of these off the table as being either unrealistic on the high side or on the low side? And what are the ethical ramifications of it? I have to tell you, you're all very enthusiastic. You smile, you engage. I feel so terrible because you're all coughing from the air in the Eagle Empire. But Tom's going to kill me and never invite me back for saying that. But anyway, I'm a Yankees fan, what can I say? But seriously, given the fact that you were a little bit under the weather, I think the enthusiasm never waned. You were all very impassioned about the subject and about the area of the country in which you live and about the issues, and that really came through because, you can pick a subject and not really vested, and it shows in 3 seconds. You're really committed to this, and I think that was very important. I think it was a great choice of a subject.
For me, first of all, great job. And I wanted to ask you guys, how many guys are you actually hunters, and how many guys have actually hunted the sage-grouse before? Us two.
Yeah, us too.
I just got my hunters in.
Yeah.
So I planned.
So what?
They're delicious, aren't they?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's like Brain was saying, just to elaborate on it a little bit more, the game fish has done a really good job in Wyoming conserving the bird. I have a buddy that's actually a wildlife biologist, and he said they're working with the stakeholders. Hunters want to hunt it, but the birds also have to prosper. So it's a two grouse limit right now, but I can tell you, going out, driving around, the birds are everywhere, so I think game fish is doing a good job. However, oil industry in Wyoming is everywhere, and so you don't see them in those areas. Hunting them is really fun. They're a smart bird. They're a very smart bird. It's challenging sometimes. to
Why?
get
What
out.
do they do if you try to hunt them?
They
run away?
But first they run away, and you're like, okay, I'm going to come get you, and then they fly 10 miles, and you're like, see,
Oh,
bird?
so they fly in addition to.
Yeah, they're very smart birds, and I mean, like from the video, they're dark. They blend in very well. So, I mean.
When they're not in season, when they don't have the great plumage, is it easier to hunt them or harder? How does the hunting season mesh with that?
You can't hunt during the breeding season, so it just happened about 2 weeks ago, and they actually recommend don't go middle of the morning. Go early in the morning, turn off your car, and get out then, because when you get out at sunrise, the birds are gone, and that's where the mating ground is. They don't let you hunt during then. It's during the fall, early in the fall, and honestly, all of them are gray, dark gray. They blend in with the dirt.
Oh, they do? Interesting.
Yeah,
But they still
You don't
taste
see that when you hone in on him on the
exactly.
video. It blends into the
So
environment.
during the fall, they look just like a a female though. So the male was the one with the big chest.
Yeah.
The other one was a female.
Of course he was.
Yeah. Yeah, they are very tasty to answer. Yeah.
So you hunt them for
Yeah.
as game?
As
game men?
honestly, we call them sage chickens in
Uh-huh.
Wyoming, and so chicken nuggets, honestly.
God.
Yeah, so they actually taste just like a chicken nugget. You can bread it here however you want.
You gotta read Professor White's book then, because, you know, this approves of hunting porpoises for game. so
Yeah, for sure.
Very interesting though.
Does he promote hunting for other purposes?
Yeah.
I think he's anti-hunting, period.
Oh, okay. I was
But
gonna say. if
read
he's
the book.
anti- I was
You
curious.
you have to read the book.
Okay, for sure.
But it is very interesting because a lot of the pull in that book is the cognitive abilities of the porpoise.
Mhm.
Very impressive. They're probably smarter than we are. They believe that they communicate non-verbally via some form of sonar.
Yeah.
Our little sage chicken here, what is he, other than being cute and being a sage nugget?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we get that he's relevant to the ecosystem, but how smart is he?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wish I would know. I just from hunting them,
They're varmint.
they're tough. I know I went.
How large are they, by the way?
I'd say they're the biggest grouse in the western states, so I'd say they're about this big.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bigger than
yeah.
Bigger than a duck.
Yeah.
Bigger
Smaller
than a duck.
Smaller than a goose.
Yeah, I bet it depends. I've seen some massive ones, and you're like, I want that one, but I just size
Do they
5.
defend their territory against you? Or you said they run away.
Yeah, I would say during the mating seasons, that they're very.
Which is why you
territorial.
can't. Which is why you can't hunt with.
Yeah. In the fall, I would say they're as territorial. They know how to get in and get out kind of thing. But back to what you said about how smart they are. I know they're very sensitive birds. They going back home talking with my dad about it. Like I said, the sound, the little things, the lights from a truck driving by at night really affect how they are, and their leks where they breed kind of gets disruptive and just messes up everything.
That's part of the problem too, is when they're sensitive, so they're migrating to other places where they'll migrate and they don't have the ecosystem around them.
Right.
So then they die off. That's kind of what happens to them.
So I just have a little bit of tactical feedback. First of all, you were so professional. The poise was outstanding. None of you used notes. It's very impressive. So obviously there was a lot of really strong information. I appreciate that.
You also did a lot of research. I thought,
Yes.
besides the fact that we have this wonderful video, the PowerPoints, and we have this adorable visual aid, the truth is that you did your own independent research. You spoke to experts, both in government and in private industry and in consulting. I think that speaks volumes when you see that somebody didn't just pull something off the internet and stop it there, and then you can have great presentation skills, but this is original. Okay, and that speaks for a great deal, I think.
Out of all the ones we've judged, I haven't seen anybody do anything like this.
No, this
including
is
the video.
unique.
So
You
that
didn't
I-
do Google,
Nobody did a
you
video?
didn't do Yahoo.
Are you serious? Wow.
You didn't do the pharma industry.
Yeah.
I've seen others that deal in ecology. I remember years ago, the Naval Academy years ago, on something that had to do with the environmental issues in the Annapolis, Maryland area. When the push-pull between enlarging the piers in the Navy base and the wetlands that were surrounding. But this was original, and we've had stuff about chickens before, and whether they're killed ethically and all that stuff. But this is a truly original presentation, and you really have to be commended for doing that.
That's interesting that you say that, because when we were brainstorming our topics, we thought about all those big name companies. But in Laramie, we have 2 Uber drivers. That's just not that's not
They
a
get paid really well.
Not an Uber judge.
it's
We
just
gotta
not
rethink
part-
this title, Uber judge.
It's not part of our economy.
Right.
It's something that is so distant from what funds our school, our towns, our families, that just wasn't even an option for
Well,
us.
they always say that all politics is local, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you picked something you know about, that's relevant to your life.
We wanted
That
to
was-
definitely bring a Western or something from our culture over to the East. I mean,
Well, you
we're-
didn't bring your
we're
cowboy
here-
hats.
We're here walking around the building, sound like this is. We were on the subway trying to get us from the airport to the hotel was ridiculous. We're all like in the subway, we're like, It's completely-
Oh, and that's nothing, it's so
It's-
much easier than New York.
It's just completely
Yeah,
different.
You could have
like-
wound
so-
up, in New York, you could wind up in another borough or potentially another state.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so it's just, I mean, it's just completely different cultures, and it's so, like, I mean, we just wanted to bring something from our culture to you. It's something you haven't heard about before, so, thank you, I'm glad you guys liked it.
So
We were-
I was also very impressed by the personal engagement. I'm going to offer just two minor suggestions as far as presenting. And I really appreciated the booklet. It might be useful consistently to reference the page number when you're referencing the booklet, so we're not.
Yeah,
flipping
for sure,
through.
yeah. I'm not trying to find, yeah.
Yep. And then the other piece is, just for framing, because you're so familiar with the problem, but we're not. So I think it took 5 or 6 or 7 minutes for me to kind of understand what the problem statement was. And even in here, it comes pretty far.
Yeah, sure.
So especially when you're doing your 10-minute or your 90-second, having a very upfront frame of what exactly the problem is
Okay.
for people who don't know.
Right,
Yeah.
especially in that 90-second one. It's not an easy get in 90 seconds to explain the issue, you know? Frame it with sufficient, we're all talking, frame it with sufficient meaning and then get into the ethical elements of it in 90 seconds.
Yeah, we can do that.
10 minutes is very doable.
Yeah, in 90 seconds.
Any other recommendations
Yeah,
for us for
yeah.
tomorrow?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, what is the name of that pill, the anti-cold pill that my husband makes me take every time we get on the long flight?
Airborne?
Airborne.
Mhm.
I'll buy some before tomorrow, I feel so bad with walking here.
And we're all, I want so much Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah.
See that?
Well, good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you so
See
much.
you again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you